and welcome to a new episode of the Dikots, where we explore dichotomies and dilemmas that we use to make decisions that in turn influence who we are. Today, we are going to talk about yet another interesting topic. It's going to be status quo versus disruptions. And to do that, we have with us today Srijeeta Chatterjee. She has 14 years of experience under her belt, working for different organizations and different marketing functions. She describes herself as a combination of instincts and insights. No one better could discuss and describe the topic better than Srijeeta, and we are going to try and poke out different nuances around marketing, branding, communications, where she will help us understand the dichotomies between status quo, sticking with traditional practices, versus thinking something very different, something very disruptive. Let's get on rolling with it. Welcome, Srijeeta.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent having you here. And we have been waiting to do this for a while, right? And I'm very excited that you finally decided to join us in this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about status quo versus disruption, but not to make it so mundane right from the beginning. I really want to explore a little bit of Srijeeta and her mind. And I have known you for a while now. I really want to hear, how did your journey begin? I mean, what's marketing for you? What's branding for you? Who influenced you?
Right. Interesting. So I started my career about 15 years back actually. And I joined in this FMCG company called Eveready Industries. And
yes.
It's a battery major. Now, initially in my first year, I was in sales and I started enjoying sales. I started enjoying, talking to the small kirana shop, owners, getting into their house at times because, you need to know what is it, how do they do their business. So getting into all those small nuances and kind of then pitching my product to them on a real-time basis every single day. I started, really liking that thrill of, being able to sell something every single day. So I kind of immediately assumed that I'm very good at sales, which of course were reflecting in the week's numbers or the month's numbers. So I got my high as a initial, intern from that. But what happened was, of course, destiny had a different plan for me. But there was my, my first line manager in marketing, my boss, who said that, I think this girl needs to be in marketing.
Yeah.
And that was the real turning point for me to start knowing what's marketing. Because even in your B school, yes, you go through a lot of case studies and my major was in marketing, but you never really know what exactly marketing does, how does it come to life in the real life scenario, right? So I think the turning point was that first person who kind of recognized that I'll be, half decent in marketing and that I am someone who can do well in marketing. So after he blocked my career in sales is how I got into marketing in the first place. So he strictly told me, no, you're not going to do sales, because my ambition was to become the first female branch manager in Eveready. That was my vision board at that point. So that would be the first, person or the first mentor I had who kind of put the basics in place. And I was fortunate enough to be working in Eveready when the Give Me Red campaign was being re-looked at. We were going through this whole, positioning challenge, or how do I make Eveready more relevant in the, current context, etc. So that work actually opened up my thinking on what marketing can do. In fact, till date, I kind of keep quoting small nuggets of research which I was exposed to during that time. What is the power of a brand and how consumers think when they look at your brand? Yeah, when you're so close to the business, so close to the brand, you sometimes don't have that kind of lateral thinking of where that brand can go.
Yeah,
so I still keep doing that. So that's how I got into marketing. But then after that, of course, I evolved. I left Eveready. I joined VIP Luggage. There I kind of was a category manager. I did a little bit of work over there. But again, going back to consumer and going back to what problem can I solve. And after that, I went into QSR. I was in the launch team for Burger King. That is where my entire, landscape of what marketing is capable of doing changed. And that's where I got introduced to Fernando Machado. And I've been absolutely mesmerized by his work. He has about 200 Cannes Lions under his belt, which means he's basically, the mafia of creative marketing and delivering, business results. So since then, I've been kind of following him, hearing more from him. What is he doing? And he has really taken disruption to the next level, right? And he's still been true to the brand. So I think my mentor and what keeps me going now in marketing is looking at inspirational work. Of course, hearing people and experts like him in the industry, but also to look at a lot of inspiration from Cannes Lions every year. So I immerse myself in those examples to get inspiration. So yeah, that's me. That's
No,
how
that's good
how
to
it
hear.
goes.
Yeah, so Srijeeta is a combination of many things, but definitely her first line manager and Fernando.
Yes.
Perfect. So we'll explore status quo and disruption. But before going there, I remember you mentioning once that branding or marketing or the status quo disruption is not so much about what you sell, but it's more about why will someone buy it.
Yes.
Right? So you are possibly indicating towards some very nuanced emotional aspects that are beneath the awareness layers.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. How do people take decisions?
Okay, so decision making actually, if I break it down, and of course, this comes from a bit of my experience and what I've learned through the different industries, because the consumer changes the way that they decide depending on which, product they're buying. But at the core of it, what I find is that there are two types of, decision making, one which is immediate and one which is future. So the immediate demand, right, that a company has to kind of meet for the consumer is very here and now, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want, your phone is, gone off, right? You need a phone today. You can't wait for another 3 years to buy a phone. And that decision making is very, very rational for a person, I think. What's your budget? What are the features? What is there in the market? What kind of technology is going to last for the next couple of years if I want to use the phone for a couple of years? But on the other hand, so this is where, you're functional, you're rational, all the, quick, things that top of mind need to remain very, very specific to the product comes into the picture. On the other hand, if I say now you've bought the phone, right? So the product need is met. But what about the connection with the brand? Of course, it's the experience that they will have for the next 5 years with the product, which kind of demonstrates the reason why they should stick to the brand, even when they're looking at an option in the future. But that is where the emotional, part comes in, I feel. Because a consumer is not going to immediately again invest in your product, right? But that consumer is going to have this journey with you for the next 5 years. So by the time that person is again coming into the market, it should be top of mind that they want to invest in your brand again. So that's where the emotional connect, because it's very easy to recall an emotion on a longer time frame.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not possible for us to remember, oh, what is the price point? Oh, what was the technology that they spoke about? That's not what, keeps them with the brand, right? What keeps them with the brand is the overall emotional experience. What is the, promise that the brand made to that person, and what is it that, other people are saying about the brand, right? So one is the reinforcement from his own experience or their own experience. The other is, of course, what is the ecosystem telling that consumer? So that's how I would say that, that's how actually the here and now demand is met through rational and very, very bullet point oriented kind of marketing. And then you kind of also keep building that layer of emotion so that this person whenever they are in the market again for future.
Which is the long-term attachment.
Which is the long-term.
Perfect. So that's great. That's a good start to the conversation. And in that context now, I want to ask you 2 questions, and you could answer them one after the other or combine them. One is, I really wanted to understand from the lenses of a marketeer as to what's the meaning of status quo and what's the meaning of disruption. But also, if you could fold that with your own experience of, say, a situation where you yourself have observed or led some disruption in traditional practices of a particular brand.
Right.
How did that impact you? How did that impact people around you? What do you think how it impacted the market?
Right. Very, very interesting question actually, because, we keep hearing, status quo, disruption, these words, in isolation, I feel. The reality is, if you ask me, they're actually quite intrinsic and they are bonded together in some way. The outcome or what we get to see is this was disruptive. Oh, this was very different. But, the reality is that it's a slow process. I would say disruption takes time. It's not that one thing which you see at the end of it, right? So it's a process. So I would call it like a slow disruption. And what do I mean by a slow disruption is that, how does any brand or any organization come to that disruptive point, right? So for startups, it's probably different. Yeah, because they're starting their journey. So they get a little bit of freedom. They have nothing to lose. So they probably try out a lot of things and whatever sticks. Where disruption becomes a little necessary and has to be practiced are actually, where the brand has a legacy. And that's where I feel, this process comes into the picture. So brands which are probably large, who've had like a very long heritage, who have a lot of market share, they need to practice disruption a little more.
No, but consciously, you mean?
Consciously. It has to be put into process.
Yeah.
It's not about just saying, I will take a risk. No, it is a process, right? So I think brands which have that legacy, which have that, large market share, they need to practice disruption as a process. And what ends up happening with time is that, people become a little risk averse because there's a lot at stake, right? And that's where the status quo kicks in, right? When you have a lot to lose, right? You're the market leader, you have 50% market share. Oh, should I take this risk at this point? No, everything is working fine. So that's where status quo kicks in. But I think that's exactly where disruption is needed, in the sense, eventually, if you look at it, it'll be almost like a bow tie. So you have a large market share, right? You're doing what you're doing. You've got the success and you have this huge, thing at stake. Then it kind of starts to narrow down, where you're kind of becoming stable, and you probably start seeing a little bit of negative sentiment coming in because you're doing the same thing. Other competition has come in. They have eaten into your market share. They have also started replicating what you were doing maybe, 3-4 years back, 5 years back. So what happens is you become, part of a sea of sameness, is what my mentor Fernando calls it. So you become part of that sea of sameness. Yeah. And that's where you start seeing erosion of, your brand preference scores, and also your market share eventually. Right. The moment that your market share gets to, go down, your P&L doesn't, look that healthy anymore because you're losing market share. That's when the C-suite comes in, says that, oh, this is not working. And I think it's too late at that point. So what you have to therefore do is that through that entire bow tie process, and the end of the bow tie is the disruption, is what I call it. So you have to have that process where you don't, you just flatten that slide into that market share loss space, so that it's almost like as, naturally sloped as possible, rather than a very sharp kind of a bow tie, right? So that's how, disruption has to be probably built in. And what aids, disruption, or what aids that thought process, is knowing your brand very well, right? If you know what is core to your brand, if you know what is that persona of the brand, why did you build it in the first place, what is the consumer problem that it was solving, then you know how to evolve it. And disruption in most cases is kind of a multiplier of that evolution. So I think that's how, I would put putting disruption into a process, rather than saying that, okay, that one thing that you did is the disruption.
I liked how you put it. I think I have 2 key takeaways already there, and I love the way you leveraged your mentor's advice to say the sea of sameness causing erosion, and then there's a need for disruption, which is fantastic. Now that you are alluding towards a change in the way you would normally work and think, right? That's possibly the trigger of an innovation. You alluded towards the need for a process as well, right? How do you instill that? Because the C-suite, I want to be very provocative here, and maybe controversial. The C-suite by nature would want to be very conservative.
Absolutely.
But unless things change from the C-suite, typically it's very difficult to mobilize things in the organization, right?
Yeah.
So how do you bring these things as part of culture?
So that's a very interesting topic per se. Yeah, you see a lot of. I mean, if I look at what's happening across the world, right? One challenge for me as a marketer has always been this whole tussle of, so what? So what you're doing this? What's it going to look like? What is the return? Right? That's the question that most marketers, and validly so, get faced on a regular basis, right? Because sales brings you the immediate dollars,
Right.
the immediate money. Marketing, on the other hand, works at different layers. I would not say that they are not delivering on the P&L, because that's the ultimate goal, right? If your marketing is not working and bringing you the dollars, then there's no point of that department, to be honest. But sales, because it's extremely measurable, you know it within the day, within the hour in some cases, right? So it's easier for the C-suite to kind of get convinced by ideas which sales brings, because it comes with that assurance of, I'm going to get home the money by the end of the day. Now, to your point, right? What does it take, and how do you instill that culture? Of course, there are C-suites which are more open to taking these risks and working on the process of a brand and the disruption and the innovation and the pipeline and all of that. And then there are people who are probably a little more risk averse, like you put it. It's fair, actually, because if you look at it, how our brains are, right? I would go a step back and go into probably the human need to be risk averse.
Yeah.
If you look at it, our brain is still that prehistoric brain, right? It's the reptilian brain, as people call it. And that brain is literally designed to keep you protected against risk, right? So I wouldn't blame anyone who's a little risk averse, right? But over time, when you are taking everyone along and giving them that consistent return, I think people get convinced over time. Yeah. So it's okay. As a marketer, the first thing I would, probably want people to be comfortable with is that there will be a lot of rejection, because the human brain is not designed to take as much risk, because we are still very prehistoric when it comes to our thinking and our mindset at the gut level, at the instinct level. So it's fine. And even if there is a no, you cannot do this, it's probably only a trigger to get more information. How are you going to do it? Why are you doing it? What does it, take to get maximum returns out of it? What's the timeline? How much do I have to invest? So a possible no, or saying that, okay, I'm not very sure about it, is just a test for the marketer or the person on the other side to give more information, to say what that process looks like, to come at it from a position of insight, that this is the reason why I'm saying this, because 5 years down the line, this is what is going to change in culture. This is what's going to change in the audience that you are targeting right now. So when I spoke about immediate demand and future demand, that's how you pivot the conversation, saying the future demand looks like this. And therefore, because my brand rests on these core pillars, I have to evolve, right? And then meet that future demand of this consumer.
Is it a different way of saying that FOMO plays a critical role in disruption?
I would say rather than FOMO, because again, FOMO is a very here and now thing. It's about losing out now, right?
Than the long term.
But yes, FOMO on the long term, if you're able to convince that this is going to erode your market share, I think nobody in the C-suite also will be okay with that.
Yeah.
Every single person in an organization should be and is ideally, uncomfortable around losing market share.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Of course. Let me ask you a little bit of a reflective question here, picking from a phrase you used. In the context of status quo versus disruption, how do you position a possible no versus an impossible yes?
Interesting. So maybe...
And do you have examples to share?
Yeah, maybe... so maybe I'll probably start with, some examples, because I think you wanted to know how I have also maybe incorporated some of this in my journey so far. So If you ask me, did I plan for all these disruptions or whatever minor, major changes I've driven? I don't think so. I don't think I've planned for them. But what I've definitely done is, come at it from inside. Like I said, right? I have an instinct to begin with. And then I go down to the insight level, that what is the reason for this instinct to be kind of getting stronger. I let it brew and incubate for a while. And then when it becomes a undeniable, I must do it, even to me, that's when I start to build it, back it with numbers, look at some outside data, look at some industry data, and then present it to whoever, +1, +2, higher up. Now, with time, the kind of industries I've been in, actually, they've also changed. So in some industries, like in FMCG or in consumer durables, when I was with, a luggage brand, or even in QSR, when I was in Burger King, things were a little different. Yeah. All these industries have their own risk-taking appetite. In my current, industry, which is in automotive, which is in energy, oil and gas, it's again a little different there, right? So if I have to look at some examples of how I've driven probably disruption in my past, so I used to manage a brand called Aristocrat Luggage. Yeah, it's a legacy brand, and it used to sell attaches, right? Suitcases where you kind of take your files and folders.
Yeah, I remember attaches.
Right. So that is the brand I was managing, right? And it was right at the bottom of the entire pyramid of, mass to premium. So VIP Industries had Alpha and Aristocrat as the value layer. The interesting thing is, those two brands combined were giving much more revenue than the premium brands at the top. So I had to do the hard work, or whatever, the boring work of managing, the value brands, where there's not much of glitz and glamour in terms of advertising spends. There's not much of, young, savvy consumer either, where you can't play a lot on design. And of course, your consumer is price sensitive, and they're slightly risk averse, right?
And how did that happen? Higher revenue from that part of the pyramid, just sheer volume? Just volume, right? So the number of people I was servicing was much higher than the number of premium
people. Than the premium. It's always that way. Yeah. So it'll give you more unit margin on top, but it'll give you much more total revenue at the bottom.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how you kind of build your brand towards premiumization. Now, I was managing those two brands, and there was this constant, decay of volume and erosion of volume coming from Aristocrat, especially in the hard luggage, segment, and especially in the attache segment, right? Now, the easy thing for the C-suite at that point was to say that, what, we're going to close this down. It's, it's not making any sense. This market is dying. Who would want a brand like this, right? You're not relevant anymore. Now, to me, as a 26, 27-year-old, that just seemed like a challenge. Like, how dare you say that you're going to, shut down my brand? By then, I was already like treating it like my baby. And I was very passionate about both the brands that I was working with. So I said, okay, just hang on, right? Just give me a few months. Let me get my bearings around this problem. So to me, it was a challenge. And to me, it was a problem to solve. So I got down to it. I understood that, okay, yes, attaches are like, they are degrowing, and I can let it be. I can just say, okay, that's the natural course of death that it will face, But then I did something. I went back and I did a lot of on-ground visits of who's still using the attache, who's this consumer, what do they really need? Have they stopped going to work? No, they've not stopped going to work, right? They're still going to work. They're still carrying those things that they need to carry to work. It's just that the mode has changed. They have moved from an attache to a backpack to a satchel. And I don't have it in my brand.
I see.
That was the aha moment for me when I stood there. It was very obvious, right? Like now when I step back, I'm like, you didn't have to really go and do this by standing at the counter and standing at the railway station, bus station. You didn't have to do that. But that was the moment I realized, oh yeah, this is the thing. This is why consumers are not buying it anymore. So that's when I went back, looked at the data, the price points at which this would be viable.
Yeah.
And how do I then migrate the brand from the hard luggage attache to the soft luggage satchel and backpacks. That itself was a huge uphill task for me. because VIP Industries at that point had segregated that, okay, if you have to make backpacks or satchels, they have to obviously earn a certain amount of margin. But also it's more urban, it's more youth, it's more Skybags, for example. So Skybags was the other brand in the portfolio. So they're like, no, you don't get to make a backpack. That's for Skybags to do. That's the role that has been assigned to Skybags. So, you can't eat into that. You'll just cannibalize Skybags. So we had to sit down with the design team and come up with a proper design language which caters to the price sensitive consumer, which is looking for an alternative for the durable hard case.
Yeah.
So the nuances which we catered to, the identity of the consumer, the problem for the consumer that we catered to with the Aristocrat soft luggage range, short haul range we used to call it, is very, very different from what Skybags was. So as soon as we kind of segregated the two identities, it became very clear to us that no, I'm not going to eat into Skybags. There's a whole huge market out there of unorganized players which come with no warranty, which come with no brand promise, which have no durability whatsoever. It's a bad product and a bad experience for the consumer. I have a huge market to play over there. So that's how we built the case. We did a lot of trials. It was just not possible at one point. It seemed like it's not going to even happen.
Yeah.
But then it did happen. We went through that whole cycle of innovation. We went through the whole cycle of rebranding, and it's out there in the world.
Yeah. And that's pretty much you see everywhere at those moments of disruption, right? The self-driving cars, flying, becoming more commercial, supersonic flights. You see it everywhere. This change in behavior, was this more driven by convenience, or was this more driven by generational change in perspectives?
In my case, in
your case, in the example,
I think the change in behavior at the end of the day, from the organization side, to take this up was actually the logic of what I will lose in the future.
And what about the change in behavior of the consumer, moving from a hard case attaché to a backpack to a satchel?
See, for the consumer, it was probably very natural. Because it's heavier, right? If you have a lighter, more convenient option than carrying the, attaché, right? Which is a little more heavy, it's a little more inconvenient, right? That switch.
And the backpack also keeps both your hands free, and attaché always locks one hand.
Correct.
So it possibly is convenience based.
It's convenience.
It's an evolution.
It's an evolution for the
But consumer. I think what you did and your team at that point might have done is to go through this whole journey of recognizing it.
Yeah.
Coming up with the aha moment, which I think you trivialized, but I think it's very important because once the aha moment has happened, it's trivial, right? But you did that. Fantastic. I want to go into another part of the discussion, and I want to talk a little bit about emotions and culture. Mm-hmm. Sitting in India, talking about brands, ads, communication, you cannot but think of how you blend emotions and culture, right? What I want to hear from you, Srijeeta, is when you think of emotional choices, when you think of cultural choices, there are disruptions, there are status quo. Especially when generations are seamlessly handing over. From your experience or from your insights or instincts, how do you see these play a role? Emotional awareness, cultural awareness, or stickiness of emotion, stickiness of culture to status quo of branding choices or disruption in branding choices? How do you see that play out?
Okay, so I would say, there is a bit of culture that every brand has to address, right? There will always be a culture. If I go back to my example, there was a culture of, carrying your files, folders, office needs in an attaché. That was a culture. That was the norm. You're seeing that happen around you. So that shaped the culture of how people were using their bags to go to work.
Yeah.
Then there was a change because availability of backpacks, the convenience side of it, etc. So that was the cultural shift which happened, right? The consumer was shaped by the convenience of it, and then they chose to shift and stay there. So I, as a marketer, had to look at that cultural shift, that, okay, the way that people were using that category, right, which was to pack things in a bag of some sort and then carry it to work. So that need was still there. right? But the evolution happened at that cultural level of how they were doing it. So I think there's always a bit of culture evolution that the
Yeah.
brand has to go along, right?
Yeah.
Because the need of the consumer keeps changing and it does get shaped by culture itself. So that being said, there are brands which typically only work on cultural triggers, right? Like QSR. So that brings me to my second example here. And I worked with Burger King, like I said. Burger King was completely across the globe, it's more culture, right? The need of, eating cleaner, better, fast food, all of that still stays because that's the core of the category. But how you evolve the brand is more cultural, right? So, for example,
There's almost a legacy loyalty.
Yes.
That you're alluding to.
Yeah. So those brands have to evolve much faster with culture because the shifts are much faster.
Yeah.
So if you look at how Burger King shifted from the 90s to the 2000s and now beyond, in the US, the culture around fast food was, earlier in the 90s was very much around, just the convenience of it. It was full of glossy, buns.
Correct.
And bright pop of, ketchup, colors. So a lot of artificial colors, a lot of, cultural nuances around eating and being seen with a burger and all of that, right?
Also the convenience of drive-through.
The convenience of drive-through. All of that was what shaped the culture around fast food eating in the 90s. So Burger King followed that. If you see their logo, their identity, it was around that, right? It had that bit of gloss on the logo, etc. Then what happened after COVID, for example, or during COVID, there was already that brewing movement around cleaner eating, healthier eating, right?
Yeah.
That's where Burger King and Fernando realized that this is going to be the big deal, health and wellness. Even before COVID, somehow they were able to spot that at the global level. So they said, okay, as a brand, I will take up this challenge of moving the industry the way that the customer is moving, right? So take out all the artificial colors, take out all the preservatives, make burgers much more wholesome so that the generation, when they realize that, oh, I have to eat cleaner, I have to eat better, they have an option, even in fast food. That's where the start of rebranding Burger King at the global level started. That's how it really started. So that's where I'm saying that culture, this movement of cleaner eating, healthier eating. So QSR brands and some brands are more dependent on how the culture is moving. Whereas some brands play mostly on emotion and how you feel. For example, in my case, I think vacation, if I put aside the short haul luggage, backpacks, etc., if you look at durables, right, like a luggage bag, basically, that's about vacation, that's about memories, that's about, it's all the good part of the travel. You don't want to be stuck with the hassle of a luggage, right? Like the zip is coming off, the handle is breaking. So that is emotion, and you will remember that, right? That I ended up with a very bad vacation because the handle broke, the zip broke, I couldn't, enjoy the rest of the thing. So I would say in these cases, it's more the emotion, which plays out, which gets attached to the brand very heavily.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it is.
It's fascinating how you kind of just blended marketing management with product management, which is true, right? The brain works in a very seamless way.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you. You described an experience of yours where it was more like you went and saw how the customer behaviors are changing, right? And then that led to some brand or marketing management change or product management, product choice change and all of that. And then there are these very well-known examples of how Steve Jobs actually introduced a product and that changed emotions and culture.
Yeah.
So it's either top down or bottom up or left to right or versus right to left. How do you see disruption in these lights?
Very interesting about Steve Jobs. It's a different example. Different, I would say, not. It's an unrelated example, right? So for Steve Jobs, it's interesting because he was very convinced about the product he's bringing, right? And he knew that there is a need from the consumer side for a better product, and he just serviced that gap. Now, if I say that, how do I relate it back to risk averseness? As a very, very good example, if you remember the iconic ad, I think 1984, which Macintosh introduced.
Yes, yeah.
Now that ad would have never seen the light of day if you go back and see. There's a very nice YouTube video. I'll probably share the link with you. You can share it with the audience. It's about the consumer research and how people reacted when they saw that ad. They said this is complete trash. They rejected the ad. All the researchers came back saying this cannot be done. This is really bad. Like, this makes no sense. So now if you look at, how risk averse, if people who were at the deciding table, if they said, oh, okay, people are rejecting it, this is extremely risky to do, the world would not have seen that Macintosh ad ever. So that's how, probably Steve Jobs went with his conviction, saying that, no, this is what I feel will do well. And that's where the instinct and insight comes into the picture of who does he want to address. It was the Mavericks. And if you show something boring to the Mavericks, would they connect? I don't think so. You need that very, very steep emotional reaction. People need to kind of sit up and take notice. So I think it's again that whole blend of knowing full well who is it, what is that, emotion that you want to bring out from people, that gives you the idea of where you should land.
Terrific. So looking forward, Srijeeta, as you look ahead, right? There are a lot of trends emerging, right? And they're also trying to keep up with generational tastes, generational choices. And the generational periodicity is also getting aggressively compressed as I look at it. But keeping all those things in mind, share with our audience a few emerging trends, either trends you see in technologies or trends you see in tastes and choices. And how do you see those? How do you predict the future as a marketeer?
Interesting. Now, one of the things which, I try to kind of keep myself aware of consciously is, am I getting too trend-led? It's good to be trend-aware, but it's not great if you're kind of only doing which are, on trend. So the thing with, marketers these days is that, people tend to get swayed by, the trend, whatever is in trend, they will do it. Now, that's the balance I think we need to strike, where you need to be trend aware, but not necessarily always trend led. So again, come back to your core. What is that your brand needs to do? So to answer your question, I think, yes, there are a lot of things changing and we have seen a lot of things change, but there will always be some things which will not change, which will be the core of your brand, which will be what your brand is here to do, what is the strategy pillars of your brand. And then you become trend aware and you evolve your brand. So that's on, how my take is to address evolution and changes and trends, etc. If it's on brand, do it. Right? If it tells you that, yes, your consumer needs this kind of a communication or a product or a change in your thinking, then by all means, please do it. But if it's only about, that eyeball for that moment, that day, then I don't know whether it will work or not. It will just make your brand a little more schizophrenic. It will give your brand that, multiple identities, which becomes a problem after a point. Because the consumer doesn't know who you are anymore, right? And that's not good. So that's on changing trends and how to manage it. That aside, what I see as, certain trends which might appear in the future is that, of course, the unequivocal sense that we are all getting is that digital is here to stay. It's going to be there for a longer time. And therefore, all that ecosystem around digital marketing, all that ecosystem around performance marketing, the entire ecosystem around using AI, I'm sure it's been done to death, like people are talking about it a lot. But What it also means is that, you can't delegate your decision as a marketer to research and AI and data and, performances and KPI. And what I mean by that is that you cannot neglect the core work of thinking and who your brand should be to data and AI. Yeah, that part still has to be with the marketing team, the brain behind the strategy. However, you can do it faster, you can do it cheaper, you can do it better if you smartly employ all these other technology and evolution of data and what AI can do. So I think AI and digital, yes, those are things which we have to embrace. But how we embrace it? Are we using it to kind of delegate our decision making to them, right? That's not right.
Yeah. So essentially, you're saying what's your choice of using them? Are you choosing to use them for information gathering and analysis, or are you trying to outsource your human creativity? Then there's a problem.
Then there's a problem, is my personal opinion. And increasingly, if you see, the temptation is to do things which are measurable, right? Just because they are measurable, you do it, right? Without really taking care of that, core of your brand, core of your emotional building. So I would say it has to be, if you look at the industry grades, they would say it has to be 50-50, but that's probably for much more mature brands, market leaders, etc. But even for smaller brands, I think it's 80-20. So if your entire P&L, if you split it, how do you fund your marketing budgets and resources? 80% has to deliver your this year's P&L, right? Because it's important. So do all the promos, activations, convert people here and now who are here in the market today. Like I spoke about the immediate demand. So 80% of your resources can go into funding that. But you have to leave that 20% to build that emotional connect, that long-term connect with people who will come into your immediate demand market in some time.
In the pipeline.
Right, so 20% at least you have to create that always on brief where you have the freedom to disrupt actually. Right? So that's how I would say this trend of only doing performance marketing and only doing things which are measurable is not something which is sustainable. So the future would be, how do you make the ecosystem of digital marketing a little more meaningful? Leave an emotional imprint. Don't just do things because it's measurable. You have to do the hard work of building your brand and that emotional ecosystem for your brand. The other trend which I foresee is a lot of more rich first party data in terms of getting more personalized and loyalty driven actions and insights. So I think it will be inevitable that now the market is very fragmented, right? Like you have n number of sources of information. So it's becoming more and more fragmented. And information is you're just bombarded, even as a consumer, you're bombarded with too many pieces of information. There are smaller brands which are coming into the limelight, so the power is really, now fragmented, I would say. So it's in smaller pockets now. It's really difficult to consolidate the market. So given that, I think first party data, using loyalty data, making people buy more and quality from you is very important. So again, don't look at how to just convert the customer into your pipeline. Also see how you want to retain them. You have to do the hard work of making that whole experience better for the customer, and that will only happen when you have access to first party information, doing it the right way, doing it more transparently. Don't just bombard them with spam. That's the laziest thing to do, right? You will see a lot of brands just taking your phone number and then just giving you reminders for promos. That's the laziest way to do it.
That's right. That's right.
Everyone can do that. So what's so different about you and your brand? How are you differentiating yourself? So use that first party information to really understand what is that pattern, what is that consumer solution that you want to bring to the table. And the last part is, of course, what I see happening is, I think agency partners have a lot more information that you have as a brand. Because agency partners see the entire ecosystem from a very, very different lens. You are restricted by your industry, but they are not. So looking at agency partners to bring in more insights around what's happening in culture, what's happening in the industry, how is the industry moving. Using their potential to the fullest is extremely, extremely critical. And I think that piece remains missing. The temptation of the marketing team to tell the agency that, you know what, I want it exactly this way, and this is the number, that is the communication, this is the message, blah, blah. So that temptation, I think we have to somewhere curtail a little bit, give them the clear brief, that one line essence of what is your problem, who is it for, what do you want to achieve from a business and a communication perspective, and then let them do their job.
Terrific. Good conversation. I could almost pick up a few pointers we had in our conversation. Obviously, when we started the conversation, I really loved how you brought in this concept of bow tie, which triggers disruption. And then one of your mentors' phrase, right? The sea of sameness, which eventually may lead to a trigger because of eroding margins. I loved our little conversation around the impossible yes versus a possible no.
Yeah.
And then you also repeatedly brought to our attention, to our audience's attention, the need to balance the long-term disruption versus a short-term need.
Yeah.
And then wonderfully positioned the concept of trend awareness, the need to be trend aware, but also the need not to get into a trend trap.
Yeah.
And I think finally you also alluded to being very, very careful about the signal to noise ratio in a fast evolving world, in a world that's trying to embrace information and technology trends. It's been wonderful having you today, Srijeeta, and thank you for a fantastic conversation. I'm pretty sure we'll get a lot of feedback from our audience wanting to know more, and hopefully we'll have another future episode on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.